are working before we get started. Always a good idea to check, make sure that everything is going as it's supposed to go, and it seems to be working just fine. So that's good. Just making sure my sound is on, because a couple of times we've had a problem where my sound wasn't on at the beginning and I had to readjust. It's fine, don't worry about it. Anyway, welcome back to Andersen Acres. If you're new here, I'm Leanne. Nice to meet you. If you're a returning viewer, glad you came back. I know most of you are watching this on the replay because it is Friday afternoon and a lot of people are simply not available. That's great. If you have a question or comment, you can not hit the mic, but you can drop it in the comments below if you're watching this on the replay. If you are watching this live, you can join us in the chat later on in the stream and we will answer some questions. But since today is the 5th Friday of the month, I wanted to do something a little bit different. When there's 5 Fridays in a month, we do something a little more seasonal. And today, we are definitely in the grips of fall, heading firmly into winter. I know that seems ridiculous to say. It's only the end of August. But we're already getting some really chilly nights, and we're already getting some, there's the goat, but we're already getting some really variable temperatures, at least where I am. So frost is not far off. So we are standing at the very edge of August, looking right into September. And that means one thing for farms, big and small. Fall has arrived. Now, people often say that spring is the busiest season on the farm. And yes, spring is incredibly busy. There's always something happening in the spring. You know, you think of planting and new babies being born and spring cleaning and all the excitement of starting fresh. And you're just so glad that it's not winter anymore. But if you've ever actually been on a farm, or even, no matter the size, big farm, little farm, hobby farm, a commercial farm, you'll know that fall is the season of insanity. It's the season that you're just counting down now. It's beautiful, it's crisp, it's full of pumpkin spice and changing leaves, but it's also a countdown clock. Okay, that clock is running and you can't stop it. So today I want to talk about all the fall stuff on the farm. The harvest, the animal care, the winter prep, and the emotions people go through. And then we'll dive into some Q&A where I'll answer your questions. And I do have questions that people submitted either in comments on YouTube videos this past week, or they found me on Facebook and dropped me a message there. So I do have a bunch of questions. If you are not watching this live, you can send me those questions, drop it in a comment, or send it to me through Facebook. I am on Facebook. You can send me a question if you're watching this on the replay. So let's get into it, because fall is the harvest season. And no matter what size your farm is, harvest always feels bigger than you expect. If you've got a large farm, this is the time when combines are out and corn and soybeans are taken in and trucks are hauling at all hours. If you live in a rural area, you have seen the vehicles out in the fields after dark. You have watched the farm trucks come and go no matter the time of day. Okay? If you are in a rural area, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're on a small farm, or even if you just have a big garden and live in the city, you still feel the rush. You got to pull everything before the frost gets to you. The tomatoes are all coming ripe at once. The zucchini won't stop multiplying. The squash is taking over, but you know, all of that is only temporary. You know that frost is coming. Okay? You might have more cucumbers than you know what to do with right now. But you also know that any day the frost could come and wipe it all out if you don't get it off the vine. Because that's what fall is. It's a race against the clock. And harvest isn't just about picking your crops off the vine. It's also about preserving those. For example, we grow way too many squash. I have way more squash than I'm going to eat in the next 2 weeks. we have to preserve some of it. And in our method, we like to use it as a puree. So I make a lot of squash purees and I freeze them because that's the way I am going to be able to preserve them. You might, depending on what you're growing, you might be canning, you might be dehydrating, you might be freeze drying, depending on what your preferred preservation is. I don't know what you guys are doing. If we just turn this way a little bit, those two at the far side, the silver and the white and the rooster with them, I don't even know where they got that plastic. I don't know where they got it or why they're fascinated by it, but I don't know. We're just, I don't know. Chickens, man. They are fascinated by that plastic. Moving on. So all of the preserving and the picking and the sorting and the cleaning and the figuring out what you're going to do with your crops, all of that takes time because food doesn't wait, but you also can't do it instantly. I mean, the food's going to go bad if you don't preserve it, or the frost is going to hit, but all of it takes time. So in the fall, you feel like you don't have enough time because you don't. None of us do. Fall is where you feel the time crunch because summer is mostly about waiting for crops to be done, waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden they're done and frost is coming. It's absolutely insane how quickly you go from the lazy days of summer to the absolute insanity of fall. You can't tell a field of beans to just hang on while you take a nap or while you preserve your apples. Okay? I've spent a couple of weeks worrying about plums because they're not going to keep forever. There's only so long plums can sit on your counter before they're not plum-like anymore. And I have spent the last couple of weeks just worrying about my plums so I don't lose them. Your food doesn't wait. It's going to continue to ripen to the point of rot. You have to do something with it. So fall becomes a blur of baskets and jars and freezer bags and trying to remember where you put the dehydrator trays because you haven't used them since last fall. It's about, what did I do with my canning lids? I tied them on a string so I wouldn't lose them. Where did I put them? Because now you've lost them all. But they're around somewhere. So it's rewarding, it's exhausting, but it is absolutely relentless. Fall is the time where you start thinking, could winter just show up yet? Even though you're going to regret uttering the word winter. And you know you will. And you definitely try not to say snow. But what are you going to do? Now, while you're up to your elbows in tomatoes and canning jars, the animals don't take a break either. Okay? These guys behind me do not care that I am in the process right now of pulling all my tomatoes and getting them turned into tomato sauce so that we have some through the winter. The animals don't care. The chickens don't care. They've now moved on and have gone to make a mess somewhere else, except there's a couple behind me. And then Arwen is just hanging out. But the animals do not care. And there are more things that might be happening on the farm than you just feeding your animals. For some farms, fall is calving season. It's actually pretty common to calve in the fall, especially if you also breed horses, because typically you want to foal in the spring. But if you breed horses and cows, you probably don't want that all at once. So a lot of people who have horses and cows, which is a lot of people, have their horses foal in the spring and their cows calve in the fall. So that just adds another layer. For some people, they like kidding or lambing in the fall, so they bred way back in the early spring so that they have babies in the fall. This is a very busy time. And thank you. We have roosters crowing over there now. But even if you're not doing a breeding season that requires you to welcome new life in fall, you're still prepping your animals for winter. That means making sure barns and pens are windproofed and you have enough bedding to get you through the winter, especially if you use something like straw, because you might not be able to find straw in January. So you have to go count your straw bales, make sure none of it's moldy or wet, make sure you have enough to get through the winter. You have to make sure that you'll have enough to make your bedding deep and to keep it dry. And you have to make sure your water systems won't freeze, or if they do freeze, that you have a backup plan. That's why we have so many buckets. A good bucket without a hole in it is invaluable in winter, because in the event the way you give your animals water freezes up, you will still be able to get water to your animals by grabbing your trusty old buckets. It also means trimming hooves before the snow makes the ground icy. Fall is a perfect time to trim hooves. You trim hooves all year round, but it's especially important in the fall because growth slows a lot in the winter as the cold temperatures set in, okay, and the light is reduced, so the growth on the hooves slows. So you trim in the fall, make sure they have really good grip on the icy ground, which is bound to show up. Even if it holds off a couple extra weeks, you're still going to end up with ice and snow. So you're trying to keep all your animals trimmed so that they have some grip on that snow and they're not slipping all over the place. It also means checking coats and making sure animals are in good condition for the long months ahead. You want to make sure that nobody's too thin. Animals that are too thin may not survive the winter. Thank you, Sauron. But you want to make sure that everyone is in good condition and doing health checks and checking your horses and your goats and your rabbits and making sure no one's gotten skinny. Because while you don't want fat, skinny is not good going into winter. They don't have that much wiggle room when it comes to keeping their weight on. They need a little bit of fat to keep them warm through the winter, especially if you're talking winters like ours. We get 40 below. We really have to prep. And beyond anything else, fall means feed. Do you have enough hay? You got to do the math. Hay math sucks. Okay? You have to count up everybody who eats hay. So then you're going, okay, so I've got horses and I've got cows and I've got goats and I've got sheep and I've got rabbits, and they don't all eat the same hay because the sheep and the goats and the cattle don't need the same quality of hay as the horse. And so do I have enough of each kind of hay? Am I going to feed everyone the same kind of hay? Probably not. That's way too expensive because the horse hay is way more money than the cattle hay. And how much do I have? And I have 6 cows and I've got 6 horses and I've got 12 goats. You are doing hay math. And you are stressing about it. And I just got whacked by acorns. This is also what's happening in the fall. The acorns are full. I'm sitting under an oak tree, which is probably a mistake. But yeah, little acorns hit me in the back because, you know, I'm sitting under an oak tree. I probably should have sat under a different tree, but I happen to like this tree. Doesn't matter. Okay. So you are playing the hay math game, and hay math is really, really hard. You're doing grain math and feed math, of course, but usually you can still get bags of grain or bags of feed from somewhere. Your feed store may not have your local stuff in the middle of winter, but they'll have something, even if it's a commercial feed. So you'll be able to get something. What you may not be able to get is hay. So you have to make sure you have enough hay from now until next now. Right? So you want to have around here. So we got hay at the end of July. And we will get hay again at the end of September or beginning of October. That hay has to last us till at least June of next year. Okay? We have to have enough hay till at least June because that's when we get our first cut. If it's been a bad spring, we might not get first cut until July. So we have to have enough hay to last us from now till next summer. And that, one, it takes up space, so you have to figure out where you're going to store it. And 2, it is expensive. Not expensive on its own. Like one bale of hay, small bale of hay, feeds Shadowfax for a week. That one bale of hay only costs $5. So one bale is not expensive, but he needs 60 bales through the year. Well, 6 times 5, you're like, oh, geez, that's hundreds of dollars all at once, right? So you're talking hundreds of dollars in hay all at once. And that's just Shadowfax. He eats about $300 worth of hay a year, which isn't expensive when you think of it as $300 a year, but you can't divide it up into all the different months. You can't say, well, it's only $25 a month. Yes, you can say that, but you have to come up with the money all at once. right? You have to be socking away that money or have the ability to come up with it all at once. And that's just for Shadowfax. He needs about $300 worth of hay. Well, a larger horse will eat far more than that. Cattle go through hay like there's no tomorrow. Sheep and goats, well, our Win is laying down right now, but she likes to forage even in the winter, so her feed costs aren't bad, but you have to do your hay math. Your grain and your feeds you can probably get. Your minerals you might have to special order in the winter. If your feed store doesn't stock them in the winter, that can be annoying. But once that snow piles up and the wind howls, running out of hay isn't an option. So fall is the time of, oh my God, do I even have enough hay? It's insane. And here's the part of fall that weighs on all of our minds: winter prep. Fall is a countdown. Every morning you wake up without snow, you're thankful, but you also know the clock is ticking. There are fences to mend, and there are barns to patch, and there are tools to fix, and machinery to repair, and all those little things that you put off all summer because you just kept telling yourself, I'll just do it before winter. Well, now we're in the before winter time frame. So all those little tasks, even if they were only tasks that would take an hour, you've now got 40 of them piled up. So you have hours upon hours of prep that you probably should have done earlier in the year and you didn't. It happens to all of us. We all do that. All of us. There are water lines to insulate and roofs to check and gutters to clean. It's just never ending, and there is never enough time. You are never going to have enough time before winter sets in. Every week feels shorter, every to-do list feels longer, and every day that sense of urgency starts to build. Because unlike spring, when a late frost might set you back, but you can bounce forward again, fall is not going to give you second chances. When winter comes, it comes. And if you're not ready, you're stuck. That's why fall has this unique blend of dread and determination. And yet fall is also my favorite season. So I know it just sounded like I hate fall. I don't. Fall is my absolute favorite season. There's something about that crisp air and the colors of the leaves that are already starting to change all around me. And the smell of hay in the barn, or in our case, in the garage, because that's where we store our hay, that's comforting. But it's a complicated comfort. Every harvest brings relief and gratitude, but also the knowledge that you're still racing the clock. Every morning without snow feels like a gift, but that gift comes with a warning. Every completed project will feel like a victory until you realize there's another one waiting. It's difficult. Fall is a season of thankfulness, but it's also a season of pressure. A lot of pressure. It's cozy and stressful all at once. And that's why I call it a season of insanity, despite it being my favorite season. I'm not going to lie to myself. It's hard, and you never have enough time. That's okay, but it's better to approach fall knowing that you're never going to have enough time, because that just kind of alleviates some of the insanity. If you know in advance, you're going to get snow before you're ready. You're going to get frost before you're ready. These dang flies can die in that frost. Thank you very much. It's been a bad fly year. We've had lots of rain this year. Not in the spring we didn't. In the spring we had wildfires. But now we've had about 3 weeks of solid rain and the flies have come. It's annoying. All right. So now I want to get to my Q&A section, because I do have a bunch of questions that people submitted because they watch on the replay, which I get. This is fairly early in the day, but I know despite people asking, I can't live stream later in the day. I am very busy on Friday nights. So I have questions about fall farming, about hobby farming in general, and really a whole bunch of other things. So I have a whole bunch here. I think I have 30, 25, whatever. I have a certain number. I was just copying them into my flies again. Copying them into my documents so I could put them on my handy e-reader. So let's go through those questions and answer them as best we can. So, first question from Katie. I always put Katie's questions first. One of Katie's questions first because she submits a lot of them. So, this one's yours, Katie. What's the biggest challenge in fall farming? The biggest challenge is balancing everything at once: harvest, animal prep, and winter prep all at the same time. That's what it is. It's the balance because you have so much to do and you got to figure out a way to fit it all in. And you are going to exhaust yourself and miss something if you focus on just one thing all at once. So you have to kind of do, okay, well, I'm going to pull some tomatoes out of the garden and I'm also going to go fix that fence. And it's the balancing act and getting it all organized. Okay, it's not even necessarily the doing, it's the figure out when the doing is going to happen. Why is fall busier than spring? Spring is exciting. I love spring because we have all the babies happening and all that great stuff. All that great stuff. But fall has higher stakes, is what I'll say. You're on a countdown to winter with no second chances because once that winter happens, you're done. Everything just stops. Because now, I mean, not everything. Obviously, you still have to feed your animals and all that. But so much of what you hope to get done just gets left on the table. It's just the way it is. How do you manage the overwhelming amount of harvest? I prioritize the crops that spoil fastest and are more susceptible to frost. So I pull tomatoes quicker than I pull squash because tomatoes are more fragile. So the things that can handle a little bit of insanity, like your zucchini and your squash, them I do last because they can stay on the vine longer. They are less likely to get eaten by our chickens, and they are hardier when it comes to frost. What's your favorite fall crop to harvest? Pumpkins. I love harvesting our pumpkins. I'm so excited for our pumpkins. They feel really festive and they kind of signal that cozy fall season. So I love pumpkins. How do you store root vegetables for winter? Cool, dark place that is only slightly humid. Hi, sweetie. There's a cat. But you don't want something really humid. You just want a little bit of humidity because too much humidity and they'll go crazy. Okay. A root cellar is ideal, but a basement works just fine. What do you do if you run out of hay midwinter? Have a breakdown. That's really a nightmare scenario. Okay. I overbuy hay in the fall, so that specifically doesn't happen in the middle of winter. Because in the middle of winter, I can't even let Shadowfax out to graze to supplement. So you have a meltdown. Once you run out, the thing is, after about the end of October, prices skyrocket and availability plummets. So after about the end of October, yeah, there will still be some hay out there for you, but it'll all be really expensive and you would have been better off just buying it a month earlier. So yeah, we try not to do that. If I notice I don't have enough hay about the beginning of October, I panic. And then I start phoning people. Brett, I need some hay. It's okay. He saves hay for me. Do animals grow thicker coats on their own? Yes. Most farm animals will naturally grow winter coats, but they still need shelter from the snow and the wind. Most of the animals, here's where I tell people don't do too much supplemental lighting because most of those winter coats are triggered by the reduction in light. So, for example, Shadowfax, our mini horse, he will start growing his winter coat. In fact, he's already sort of starting it because the days are growing shorter. If he was in a stall in a barn and we had the lights on for 16 hours a day, that wouldn't get triggered. The process by which he gets his fur, his winter woolies, wouldn't be triggered. So what I always tell people in the winter, make sure you're not using a ton of supplemental light. You want the natural shortening of the days to trigger those thicker coats because it's not the temperature. Okay, it's the temperature might determine how much of a coat they get. Like obviously Shadowfax will have a thicker winter woolly than a miniature horse in Tennessee where it's much warmer in the winter. But it's the light that tells their body it's time to start making that winter coat. So don't do too much artificial lighting or you could impede your animal's coat growth. Is fall a good time to breed goats? Sometimes it's the only time, fall and early winter. So goats, depending on the breed, some breeds only come into season seasonally. They only come into season in the late spring, late fall, and early winter. So for a lot of breeds, especially the bigger breeds, like Arwen will come into heat more often because she'll cycle more because she's a smaller breed. But if you have a standard size goat breed, they often don't cycle year round. They only cycle in the fall and early winter. So sometimes fall is the only time to breed goats. But a lot of people just want kids in the spring anyway. So even if they have seasonal ovulators, they still want babies born in spring. So goats are pregnant for about 5 months. So do the math and work backwards. If you want May babies, May, then go backwards, right? Then you go April, March, February, January, December. Maybe I should breed at the end of November, beginning of December. So that's the best way to do it. Just work your math backward. Do you enjoy canning? Yes and no. I like the results. Like, there's nothing better than making my own jams and jellies. Nothing better. But the process is annoyingly tedious. Canning is tedious. Don't let anybody tell you differently. First, you have to prep what you're canning, and then if you're doing something like a jam or a jelly, now you have to turn it into the product, like the jam or the jelly. And then you have to can it, and then you have to let it cool, and then you got to make sure your seals are good and nothing's going to pop. Because if your seals aren't good, it's all wrecked anyway. So I like the results. I don't necessarily love the process, only because it takes so long. What's the worst part of fall chores? Repairing the fences after the first frost. Man, your hands get cold. Sometimes when you're repairing fences, you have to take your gloves off because your gloves aren't giving you the dexterity you need. So the thing I hate the most is having no gloves on and having to do things that require dexterity because your hands are freaking cold. So I hate repairing fences because inevitably there's going to be a bit of wire that you just can't get a grip on, and you can't use your pliers because they can't get in there. And so you got to use your fingers, and it's annoying. But sometimes, you do what you got to do. How do you keep your water from freezing? People have a lot of different solutions. Some people use heaters, or they use heated water buckets, or good insulation on water lines, or things like that. It gets colder than 40 below here. Most of those solutions are not going to work all winter. We literally just make sure we have a gajillion buckets and bring fresh water out every single time we go, because we know that it's going to be 40 below for at least a stretch of a few weeks in the winter. So if it's going to be that cold, we need to make sure we are compensating for the fact that all the outdoor waters, the heaters and that, they're going to stop working because it's just that cold. So we make sure we just take our buckets and we buy extras so we have lots of buckets to get us through the winter. How long does harvesting usually take? Weeks. And I say that because every plant is on a different timeline, right? Some things start to mature in late July. Other things are still not mature and we're at the end of August. So it takes literal weeks. It's not a one-day job, and you're usually juggling it with your animal chores. And some things like the tomatoes, you pull the ones that are blushing, but you leave the ones that aren't blushing because you just want to pull them when they're starting to blush, and it's a bit of a process. So it takes multiple weeks to get all the crops in, and you kind of have to, depending on the year, you may have to decide which crops matter the most to you and get those in soonest. What fall crop is the most work? Tomatoes. Because right now, you'll have like 2 or 3 blushing every day. At some point, I'm going to go out there and it's going to be all of them. And I'm going to be pulling what are going to be hundreds of tomatoes off the vines all at once. And it's going to be overwhelming, because then we have to wash the tomatoes, and we have to cut the tomatoes, and we have to roast the tomatoes, and we have to make the sauce, and we have to can the sauce, and we have to freeze the sauce. So tomatoes are the most work, but I find them the most rewarding. Okay. They're also the most delicate, one of the most delicate, not the most delicate, but they're more delicate than a lot of things. So tomatoes are a lot of work, but also quite rewarding. How do you prepare your chickens for winter? Okay, so we make sure that our chickens have an insulated, draft-free coop that still has a ton of ventilation. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but what we're looking at is you don't want air blowing on the birds. So you want draft free where the birds are, so at the ground and where they roost. But above that, you want vents so the air moves because you don't want moisture trapped. So you want ventilation up above the birds so that the air can still escape and the moisture can get out of the coop. If the moisture gets stuck, you're going to have frostbite. We also do things like we make sure that we check their water 3-4 times a day, and we do not add heat. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you add heat and there is moisture in the barn, they're going to get frostbite. The cause of frostbite is moisture, not necessarily the cold. So we've had 40 below and no frostbite because we make sure to control the moisture. I have hygrometers in the barn making sure it doesn't get too humid. So there's a lot that goes into keeping chickens over the winter. It's worth it. They're worth it. We love them. I just got hit by another acorn. How do you deal with predators in the fall? Predators get more desperate as winter approaches. Okay? So secure housing and our livestock guardian dogs. Tequila and vodka are worth their weight in gold. So if you do have livestock and you are having a problem with predators in the fall and winter, that's not abnormal. Fall and winter brings out those predators as the food that they can find naturally kind of dwindles. So I do recommend livestock guardian dogs if you're willing to train them, and I do recommend getting puppies instead of adults and then train them up to be exactly what you want. But they are a lifesaver on our farm. I am a huge advocate for livestock guardian dogs on the farm. Is it better to butcher animals in the fall or spring? Fall is traditional because it's cooler and the flies tend to be gone. So around here, people who do butcher their own animals wait until after the first frost because flies, okay? We live in an area where flies are out of control in the late summer, early fall. So everyone just waits for that first frost and then they process, okay? And it's also a good time because feed costs start to go up when you're talking about moving into fall and winter. So it's a good time to process your excess animals, and it puts food in your freezer. And to anyone who's going to go, who could even do that? I could never process my own animal. That's fine. But know that the meat you buy at the grocery store had to come from somewhere. So some people like to do it themselves. We don't process animals here on the farm. Mostly because that's just not something I'm interested in. Tristan wants to take them to an abattoir for processing chickens and turkeys, but we don't want to do it here on the farm. It's just not a process I'm particularly interested in. Do you like fall more than spring? I answered this very early on in the stream, but yes. I know it's a love-hate relationship, but fall is my favorite season. It's also the most stressful, but I like fall. I like the colors and I like the crispness in the air in mid-September. And I like those very first snowfalls in October. I like fall, okay? Even with everything that goes into fall, I like fall. I just do. Do animals sense the seasons changing? Yes. Animals absolutely know the season's about to change. You will notice their coats start to grow and they change their eating habits and they are naturally preparing for the long dark of winter. And I say the long dark of winter because our winters are very dark. We're pretty far north. We're up in Canada. So it's dark for a long time, especially in December. We only have a couple of hours of light. So it's dark and the animals like to get prepared and they know how to do it. So provide them the food they need in order for them to really blossom. What's your favorite farm smell in the fall? Freshly stacked hay. That hay that has just come off the field, it'll never smell as good because in January, that hay is not as fresh, right? It's been sitting since September. But my favorite smell on the farm in the fall is those freshly stacked bales. They smell fantastic and fresh because they are. A few months later, they just smell like grass. But right at the beginning, they smell like nature. And it's fantastic. Do you decorate the farm for fall? Yeah, we bring out our Halloween decorations because we love Halloween. We love the fall. We grabbed some pumpkins. We love to decorate for the fall. You'll start to see that starting next weekend. You'll start to see the fall decorations taking place. We never did take down the ghost, so you will slowly start to see that taking place. One of my favorite things, pumpkins. I have some white pumpkins that I'm hoping will be ready in a couple weeks and we'll be able to put out as decorations because they're gorgeous. There's quail talking. Too many quail talking. Okay. I thought that quail was dead, but she just got up, so she's not dead. Whatever. How do you plan for hay? You have to do hay math, okay? You have to figure out first of all what size bale that you buy. So we buy small squares because they're easier to maneuver around, and we don't have a ton of hay-eating animals. So first of all, figure out this is the size bale I buy. How long does that bale last me? Then do the math. How many do you need to get through a year? Then add 25% because they eat more in the winter. Okay, so figure out how long did that last bale last me? A week? Okay, so I need at least 52 of them plus 25%. Okay, so you're looking at probably 65 to 70 bales of that size. Okay, if one bale lasted you a week. Obviously, probably one bale didn't last you a week, but just using basic math. So you have to actually do the math. What about the quail and other small animals in winter? The quail do fantastic in winter. We literally do nothing special for the quail. The quail are just off to the side here. We literally do nothing special. Okay? Their house isn't even insulated. They have zero problem with 40 below. Like, zero problem. They don't care. The smaller animals like the rabbits, also, they do better in the cold than the heat. You will have more losses with rabbits in the heat of summer than you will in the cold of winter, as long as they can get out of the wind. Make sure they can get out of the wind and they're fine. Another fly. Oh my God. How do you handle muddy fall weather? I hate winter. I hate fall mud. I hate spring mud. We have a lot of mud. You just do the best you can. You use sand and you use gravel to try to reduce the mucky muck, and you try to improve drainage to your pens, and sometimes you accept that the mud is inevitable and you're just going to have to cope till it dries up or freezes. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. On the farm, sometimes you just have to live with mud. Just the way it is. Do you grow cover crops in fall? Yes. Cover crops help protect your soil, and they add nutrients for spring planting. So a good cover crop, she's not dead, I promise. Somebody always asks me if Erwin's dead. I promise she's not. She's just stretching out. But a good cover crop can protect your soil, and it does a world of good. So if you are interested in cover crops, there's some really good people on YouTube. I'm not an expert in cover crops. I just do what I'm told. But cover crops are fantastic. There's some really good people on YouTube who have really a lot of knowledge when it comes to cover crops. So I recommend looking some of them up. What's the earliest frost you've seen? August. Again, we live pretty high up in Canada. We live pretty far north. We have had frost mid-August before. Not this year, we haven't, but yeah. Frost has been getting later and later in the year, so I'm not expecting frost in August this year. But yes, we have had frost in August. Probably we'll have frost mid-September, but we've seen it in August. How do you prepare the rabbits for winter? Make sure their houses are stuffed with straw or hay or whatever bedding you use. A lot of bedding so they can make their own kind of nests. Make sure they can stay out of the wind because you don't want them to get a bunch of wind or they'll freeze. And you want to make sure they have plenty of ventilation. Again, that sounds counterintuitive. But you want the ventilation to pass above them, or at least you want them to be able to get out of the wind if the ventilation's running this way. You want them to not have to sit in the wind, but you do want moisture to be able to escape from your rabbit houses. Do you prefer wood stoves or electric heat for barns? Neither. Most animals, unless they are elderly or ill, will do just fine without heat. In fact, they do better without it. I know some people are stuck on providing their chickens or their rabbits with heat lamps. It's not necessarily worth it. It becomes dangerous if your power goes out or you don't have enough wood for the wood stove, and it's also a fire risk. And they're not adapted then to the cold, so they could go outside and get sick. So it's just better to do everything you can short of adding too much heat to your barn. You don't want that heat can also end up trapping moisture, and you definitely don't want to trap moisture. Hi, Arwen. She's not going to come over here. So no, I don't like any heat in my barn. How do you store pumpkins? I puree them because I'm probably making pumpkin pie or pumpkin cheesecake, depending on my mood, or pumpkin bread. So usually I'm using pumpkin in a pureed form, so I tend to puree and freeze. But you can it, or if you don't want to break it down at all, you can leave it whole and keep it in a cool place, and they will keep for a while. Not forever, but they'll keep for like a month and a half, as long as they're in a cool, dry place. Hi, sweetheart. So we have Arwen did end up joining us. Hi, sweet pea. Good girl. So she did end up joining us. But yeah, pumpkins keep pretty well if you just keep them out of the sun and in a cool, dry place. Do you dread winter? I don't dread it, but I have a healthy respect for winter. Winter can make or break a farm. And we live where winter could make or break anyone. Our winters are harsh and our winters are long, like 40 below for weeks at a time, right? So I don't dread it, but I know darn well that you have to have some respect for winter. How do you prepare dogs for winter? Feed them extra food. Make sure their coats are coming in nice and thick. Vodka's is already well on its way to being a fuzzy woolly bear. But apparently just give them more. Make sure they have plenty of access to good food and water and fresh, clean water every day. And they should be fine. I'm assuming you're asking about dogs that are supposed to be outside. Like, I wouldn't do that with a Rottie because Rotties don't have enough of a coat. But we have Great Pyrenees and a Golden Doodle, but we're not talking about the Golden Doodle. But we have Great Pyrenees, and they'll be just fine outside most of the winter. Like, they can come in the house if they want. They're allowed in the house whenever they want, but they can also go outside whenever they want. So they spend most of their time outside. What's your least favorite fall farm job? I don't love mucking out the barns and scouring them. So I scour the barns twice a year. Okay, I scour the barns twice a year because it is spring and fall. And I don't love scouring the barn, but you got to clean it up. You got to make sure it's nice and clean for the animals because they need fresh, clean bedding and fresh, clean barn. I don't love scouring the barn, but it's got to be done. It's dirty, heavy work, and I don't like it, but I'll do it for them. Do you enjoy the colors of fall? Yes, it's one of my favorite things of the fall. The colors of fall make the stress of the season a little bit more bearable. And the colors are one of my favorite things about fall. Like, I've already got yellows and oranges and reds showing up here. Above me, I've got, oranges and browns, really nice. That's really beautiful colors. So we have some maple trees that are turning red over there, and they're beautiful. I love the colors of fall. Do you raise animals differently in fall than in summer? Yes, we make double sure that all the shelters are adequate. We increase the available feed to make sure nobody loses weight. And as the days shorten, routine does change. What's the hardest part of balancing fall chores? Everything happens all at once and everything needs to be done now. And deciding what's the most important and what, if frost came tomorrow, you could let go is hard because you want to do everything, but you don't have the time. So it's really just prioritizing things. Do you grow anything in a fall greenhouse? A little bit, but our winters are really too vicious for anything to grow too much. So we grow some like cold hardy spinach, but other than that, it is much too difficult. Kale too, but other than that, it is too difficult because our winters come quickly and they come with a vengeance. Like, it's cold. So we don't do too much in terms of fall growing. Hello, my baby Arwen. My goat just wants pets. Do animals ever enjoy the snow? Yeah, most of ours do. Our rabbits love to romp in the snow, and Shadowfax loves the snow. Like, winter's his favorite season. Arwen would rather not have snow, and you also have goobers on your head. Thank you. But Arwen would rather not have the snow, but most of the animals love it. The dogs adore it. The cats are ambivalent about pretty much everything because they're cats. Do you use lights in your coop to extend egg laying? No, I usually just let them follow their normal cycle. I just don't sell as many eggs because I don't have as many to sell. It doesn't really bother me. I have enough hens between here and the far coop. I have enough hens that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many lay eggs, because they still lay in the fall. They just slow down. They just don't lay as often, right? So they still are going to lay you eggs. It just won't be every day. Okay. Sometimes they'll take a small winter break as they molt. For some reason, our birds like to molt in January, and it's dumb. But our new layers, our young ones that were just hatched this year, they will lay all through the winter. So we'll still get the eggs our family needs. Hi, sweetie. What's the best part of fall evenings? The fires. We sit around the fire pit. The horse and the goat come hang out with us. The dogs. The fires. We love having a fall fire. We have fall fires multiple times a week just because we can. What advice would you give to new farmers facing their first fall? Start early. Do not underestimate how much work fall is on the farm. Okay? Do not underestimate it. Don't worry about aesthetics. Just get her done. Because you spend too much time worrying about, does my barn look picture perfect? You're going to end up in a situation where you didn't fix the fence because you were worried about how pretty the barn was. So definitely pick function over form. Just get her done. Don't underestimate how quickly we'll show up. Do you think fall is worth the chaos? Yes, because without the chaos of fall, you don't get the rest of the year. And I love fall anyway. It's exhausting, but also rewarding, and it reminds you why we farm in the first place. Okay, it reminds you why you do this, because you could give up. You could just pack it in the fall and say, you know what, I don't want to. And some people don't house their animals over winter. They send them off for processing and they buy fresh animals in the spring, and that's okay. But some of us decide, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. And so we do it. And it makes you appreciate every single one of them. But I have to get going, which is my refrain every single Friday. I do have things I have to get done. I have to go. So that is going to be about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. Now, fall is truly the season of insanity, full of harvest, prep, panic, and gratitude. And it's got just enough beauty to make it all worth it. So if you've got a fall chore you love or hate, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you are watching this on the replay, I will be sure to check them out. And don't forget to drop your questions in the comments or find me over on Facebook, and we will come back next week and answer some more questions. We are doing a farm talk next week where it's all about what's up on the farm. So we will definitely see you then. And thank you for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's go out by looking at what's going on over there.